Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 53 based on novel. So let's start. Lin Dong stood before the spatial crack. He did not know what kind of expression he was showing on his face, but there was a little cold sweat on his forehead. Although he had a sense of foreboding after finding out from Liu Yang that Yuan and Lingqing Xu had unexpectedly visited his parents, he never imagined that the two of them had actually met. How should he explain? While Lin Dong was having a mini breakdown, the one who had been staring at him with a pair of beautiful yet frosty and piercing eyes, Yuan, faintly smiled as she gave him a meaningful look before leaping past him. Subsequently, her slender figure disappeared into the spatial crack. Upon seeing this, Lin Dong helplessly shook his head before following. Outside the Great Desolate Tablet, two figures shot out from the tablet and appeared in the sky. Currently, layers of Yuan power light spread over its exterior. Ying Xuanzi, Little Martin, First Elder Zhu Li and the others were solemnly waiting with grave expressions. Anxiety surfaced in their eyes when they saw the two figures exit. Only after clearly identifying the two figures did they finally sigh in relief. What is the situation? Ying Xuanzi could not resist asking. After all, he was aware of just how terrifying the Yimo suppressed within the Great Desolate Table was. If it managed to escape, it would bring about a calamity onto Dao sect. We have finished it off. Lin Dong smiled. Ying Xuanzi finally heaved a sigh of relief after hearing this. Soon after, the various defenses in the sky also disappeared. Lin Dong turned his head. He looked at the ancient Great Desolate Tablet below and beckoned with his hand. Many rays of light shot out from within the Great Desolate Tablet. After which, the stone table rapidly shrunk. Finally, it became as big as a palm and landed into Lin Dong's hand. He fiddled with the stone tablet in his hand. After having resolved the problem of the Yimo, Lin Dong could vaguely detect the mighty aura emanating from within the Great Desolate Tablet. The Great Desolate Tablet was ranked a high third on the ancient divine object rankings. The symbol ancestor had created it back then with the purpose of suppressing and killing Yimo. Countless Yimo kings had died under the stone tablet during that ancient era. If it was not because the Great Desolate Tablet was subsequently badly damaged, it was likely that the true king, whose strength had reached the level of 2 reincarnation tribulations, would have difficulty creating such a dire situation for the tablet. Now that the Great Desolate Tablet was in Lin Dong's hands, it was undoubtedly akin to adding wings to a ferocious tiger. Lin Dong could be considered a true devil slayer. He possessed many treasures that were able to suppress the Yimo. Chen Zhen smacked his lips regretfully after seeing that the Great Desolate Tablet had been kept by Lin Dong. Their desolate hall was most proud of their Great Desolate scripture. Although it was extremely rare for someone to have the qualifications to practice this martial art, it could still be considered the main treasure of the hall. Now that it had been taken away, the desolate hall would lose its frightening reputation. Lin Dong involuntarily smiled when he saw this expression. He clenched his hand and mental energy gathered within. It directly transformed into a palm-sized stone tablet in his hand. After which, this stone tablet was tossed to Chen Zhen. Martial Uncle Chen Zhen, this is the cultivation method for the Great Desolate Scripture. However, this martial art is far too deep and profound. Unless one possesses the necessary talent, not only will one be incapable of learning it, but attempting to do so will also bring harm to the individual. Therefore, those who wish to try and comprehend it must undergo various selections. Lin Dong said. If someone with overwhelming talent was to comprehend this martial art in future, it might end up creating an expert of great importance to Dao sect. Naturally, Lin Dong could not be selfish. Without Dao sect, it was likely that he would have also been unable to obtain the Great Desolate Scripture. Chen Zhen hastily received the stone tablet as joy involuntarily surged on his elderly face. He hurriedly nodded and said, "You can be rest assured that there will definitely be someone amongst the younger generation of the Desolate Hall who will be able to comprehend it in future." Lin Dong smiled. He looked at the empty ground and heaved a big sigh of relief in his heart. He had finally resolved the problem of the Great Desolate Tablet. In this way, there was only one problem left. Yuan Gate, Since you wish to invade Dao sect, I shall wait for you here. Lingdong lifted his head. His eyes gradually became cold as he looked towards the southwest direction. Overflowing murderous desire rose within his eyes. In the next 2 days, Lingdong personally stood guard in Dao sect. With a strong pillar like him, the atmosphere of the entire Dao sect was completely transformed. If Dao sect was described as being filled with anxiety in the past, they were now filled with readiness to fight. Even if Yuan Gate was to launch a full invasion, it was unlikely that they would feel no fear. The source of this courage was the skinny figure who stood atop a mountain each day. That figure was not tall and bulky, but was akin to a source of faith. Every disciple within Dao sect believed that as long as the figure remained standing, their Dao sect would shine forever like the sun in the sky. During the 2 days, all the disciples would turn their eyes towards the tallest peak in Dao sect after completing their daily training. Their eyes were filled with fervor and respect. The eyes of some young ladies would even contain admiration and bashfulness. After all, that figure, which had a demeanor that even Ying Xuanzi could not match, did indeed possess substantial destructive force on some ignorant young ladies. Of course, none of them dwelled too deeply on such thoughts. This was because there would be an equally outstanding figure beside Lingdong every day. She possessed a pretty face and ice-blue long hair which glittered beautifully under the setting sun. Although there was a frightening chillness constantly present around her, everyone could sense that her eyes would become extremely gentle when they shifted towards the young man. It was to the extent that it could melt even a metal heart. Lingdong likewise used these 2 days to completely refine and control the Great Desolate Tablet. This proceeded extremely smoothly. After all, the Great Desolate Tablet was without an owner and Lingdong had gained its acceptance. Hence, this refinement process did not encounter any hindrance. Lingdong could feel just how powerful the Great Desolate Tablet was after having refined it. It was different from the ancestral stone, which was a divine object that gently purified demonic qi. The Great Desolate Tablet was made with the purpose of suppressing and killing Yimo. Hence, it possessed an incomparable offensive power. Such power caused even Lingdong to praise in his heart. With the Great Desolate Tablet in his hands, he would undoubtedly possess another powerful technique when dealing with Yimo in future. 2 days quietly passed by while Lingdong refined the Great Desolate Tablet. However, Lingdong felt a little uncertain when the anticipated scene of Yuan Gate launching a huge invasion did not occur. The powerful army that was solemnly waiting did not discover any traces of Yuan Gate. Of course, despite such uncertainty, the entire Dao sect retained the necessary caution. The only difference was that Lingdong was gradually increasing the size of the territory being searched by Dao sect and began to gather various information about the Eastern Xian region. In the past, Dao sect seldom did such a thing. This was because they had been forced by Yuan Gate to the point of only being able to protect the sect. They did not possess the additional strength to bother about other matters. Another 2 days once again passed by amidst this strange silence. Lingdong stood with his hands behind his back on the mountain. His eyes leaped over the bustling scene in Dao sect and peered into the distance. The sky was blue, while a flock of birds flew past. It appeared extremely leisurely. Is there still no activity? Lingdong frowned and muttered. Based on the information we have received, no traces of Yuan Gate have been found within a 1,000-mile radius of Dao sect. Behind him, Ying Huan replied after hearing his mutter. Yuan Gate has a deep-seated hatred for our Dao sect. Amongst the super sects in the Eastern Xian region, Dao sect is the one that they wish to eliminate the most. Normally speaking, they should be unable to endure the fact that our Dao sect is still standing. Yet, why is it that they have become quiet during this period of time? Lingdong softly said. Ying Huan shook her head and asked, has there been any activity in the Great Yang Empire? Nothing. I have set up a spatial imprint in the Great Yang Empire. I should be able to detect any activity and hurry over immediately. Lingdong shook his head. His parents were in the Great Yang Empire. Hence, the defense there must naturally be perfect. Ying Huan also frowned. This strange peacefulness had instead caused one to feel uneasy. Both of them stood on the mountain. It was a long time later before they shook their heads. They were about to leave when Lin Dong suddenly turned his head. A figure was swiftly rushing towards them from the direction of Dao sect. It soon appeared in their sights. Senior brother Lin Dong, little senior sister Huan. That figure rapidly approached and a somewhat anxious exclamation entered their ears. Anran? What is it? Lin Dong looked at the young lady, who had anxiously hurried over, before he asked in a slightly startled manner. Bad news. Anran's small face was a little flushed as she urgently spoke. Sect Master has asked me to inform the both of you that Yuan Gate has finally made a move. Oh. Lin Dong was slightly startled. He hurriedly said, Yuan Gate has attacked. No, Anran panted a couple of times. Her small face slightly altered as she said, Yuan Gate did not attack our Dao sect, but instead went to attack Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Based on the information we have obtained, Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace has suffered a series of continuous defeats. They are about to lose their sect. Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Lin Dong and Ying Huan were startled upon hearing this. The former's expression suddenly changed drastically. Senior brother Lin Dong, Sect Master has sent me to ask you what should we do. Do we go and help Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace or do we guard Dao sect? Anran asked. Lin Dong clenched his fists tightly as his eyes flashed anxiously. If they were to head to Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, they would definitely end up splitting their forces. What would they do if they fell for Yuan Gate's trick to divert their forces away and Yuan Gate ended up taking the opportunity to attack Dao sect? However, if they did not go, Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace would definitely be destroyed. At that time, Lingqing Xu would likely be unable to escape this calamity. Lin Dong was clearly unable to sit idly and do nothing when he thought about the prideful lady, whom he could not forget. Amongst the super sects in the Eastern Xian region, only our Dao sect and Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace are left. Our enemy is Yuan Gate. Therefore, we can be said to each make up half of an alliance. It would not benefit our Dao sect if they were destroyed. A faint voice was transmitted from behind as Lin Dong's eyes flashed. But Lin Dong turned his head and looked at Ying Huan's pretty face. The latter glanced at him before immediately turning her head away and said, I can place a spatial imprint in Dao sect. We can immediately tear open space and hurry back if any unexpected changes occur. There should be enough time to do so. Lin Dong briefly hesitated. However, he was not an indecisive person. He quickly weighed the situation and nodded. Anran, inform Sect Master that we will leave and reinforce Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Understood. Anran hurriedly replied, before she swiftly turned around and left. Soon after, an urgent bell resounded across the entire Dao sect. Lin Dong looked at Dao sect, which had fallen into an uproar. He let out a deep breath and looked at Ying Huan. After a little hesitation, he said, Why don't you remain behind and guard Dao sect? Ying Huan's pretty eyes looked at him. Her eyes caused Lin Dong to laugh dryly in an uneasy manner. Soon after, she finally extended her icy hand and gently grabbed Lin Dong's arm. An unusually pretty smile was suddenly revealed on her frosty and pretty face. However, before Lin Dong could become intoxicated by this brilliant smile, a drawn-out voice reached his ears, causing his head to be immediately covered in perspiration. I also wish to go. Additionally, I want to meet that girl called Lingqing Xu. Back then, I only saw her from afar and did not manage to get a clear look. Blue sky and green land. Majestic mountains extended to the ends of one's sight like giant dragons. This vast land was a paradise. However, now that the fires of war had spread across the Eastern Xian region, even this paradise had not been spared. Its peace and tranquility did not last for long, before a miserable cry suddenly tore apart the heavens. If one looked towards the origin of the cry, one would see the surging black clouds in the distant sky. These black clouds gave off an endless aura of evilness. Within these black clouds, one could see an incomparably enormous light screen. Countless enormous islands floated in the sky inside this light screen. Mists lingered on the islands while cranes spread their wings. It was peaceful, however, Such peace appeared exceptionally fragile within the thick evilness that wrapped around it. Countless screams continuously emerged from the evil aura. If one took a closer look, one would see figures that seemingly blotted the sky within the black clouds. These figures all wore the same clothes. Moreover, there was a black and white symbol on their chests. This was the mark of the Yuan Gate, and these people were all Yuan Gate disciples. These Yuan Gate disciples were currently viciously staring at the mountainous islands within the light screen. Evil black lights flitted across the depths of their eyes, a look that appeared rather sinister and terrifying. From the looks of it, the former arrogance of the Yuan Gate disciples was no longer present. Outside the tremendous light screen, one could see several figures dressed differently from the Yuan Gate disciples. They seemed to be resisting the advance of the black clouds. Boundless Yuan power erupted, however they would occasionally be enveloped by the frightening attacks that swept out from the black clouds as mournful cries rang out in succession. Although they were doing their best to resist, it was obvious that their defenses had completely crumbled under the overwhelming offensive of the Yuan Gate. Blade light swept past as fresh blood danced in the air. It was miserable to the extreme. Fellow disciples, protect our Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Kill the Yuan Gate dogs. A figure with scarlet-red eyes roared at the heavens. His roar was filled with despair and thick hatred. Attack! The Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples at his side also howled. Waves of attacks flew towards the black clouds, causing miserable screams to emerge. Their attacks roused the ferocity of even more Yuan Gate disciples. The black aura in their eyes flashed as their attacks grew fiercer. Those Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples were immediately slaughtered as fresh blood seemed to dye the sky red. At the center of the black clouds, several figures watched Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace that was protected within the sect protection formation with detached eyes. This was their final defense. As long as this formation was broken, Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace would be completely exposed to the butcher's knife of their Yuan Gate. Speed up the attacks and destroy the formation. The figure at the front indifferently said. Yes, First Elder. The Yuan Gate experts to the side immediately received his order and loud shouts sounded out. Countless Yuan power pillars gushed out from the black clouds. Flickering black light could be faintly seen within the Yuan power. Powerful attacks blasted the formation, immediately causing ripples to form, while the glowing patterns on the formation dimmed. Don't worry, First Elder. From the looks of it, Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace's formation will not last for long. An elder behind the First Elder laughed and said. Yesterday, the Master of Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace was seriously injured by First Elder and has likely died. Moreover, the numerous powerful elders have suffered substantial injuries. There are only a few younger generation members left in Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Hence, it will be difficult to stop our Yuan Gate's attacks. The black mists dispersed, revealing First Elder's figure. He had a set of deep-set eyes and looked like a skeleton. Thick black light was present within those eyes. He shook his head upon hearing these words and said, Do not underestimate Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. According to what I know, there is perhaps a great secret hidden within the palace. The elders behind him were taken aback. Their expressions were rather doubtful. It was obvious that they had never heard of this so-called great secret. Do not ask me about it. Let's not mention myself, even the three sect masters do not know what it is. First Elder faintly said. Since it is so important, why have the three sect masters not personally come? One of the elders asked in a low voice. The three sect elders are currently at the most critical juncture of attacking the reincarnation stage and cannot be distracted. This old man is enough to deal with such matters. First Elder shook his head and replied. First Elder is right, with you personally taking action, what can Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace amount to? Praised and laughter sounded out. After dealing with Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, only Dao sect is left. This most loathsome Dao sect, the three sect masters have said that they will personally deal with them when they are out. This is truly a blessing for Dao sect. First Elder laughed sinisterly. First Elder, I've heard that the Dao sect's Lin Dong has returned and seems to be rather powerful. Even Zhao Kuei has been killed by him. Oh. The ant that was driven out of the eastern Xian region like a homeless dog by our Dao sect. Powerful? Zhao Kuei was only able to advance to the samsara stage after using numerous methods. With such weak and superficial strength, this old man could have easily annihilated him. It's good that he has been finished off by Lin Dong. This will allow Yuan Gate to stop losing face. At this point, a sinister smile suddenly surfaced on First Elder's face. As for that Lin Dong, this old man will make him understand. 3 years ago, our Yuan Gate was able to beat him like a stray dog. 3 years later, we can similarly make him beg for forgiveness like a dog. Haha, First Elder is right. The crowd of Yuan Gate elders all burst in laughter that was filled with a twisted killing intent. On a majestic floating island within the enormous formation, countless Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples nervously watched the continuously shuddering formation. The gazes that looked outside the formation were filled with hatred. All disciples, set up your arrays. If the great sect protecting formation is broken, immediately activate the arrays and receive our enemies. A clear voice wrapped by boundless Yuan power echoed in the sky above the island, transmitting to the entire Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Understood. Countless Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples replied in unison. Soon after, they looked towards the sky where a thin and beautiful figure stood. She wore a green dress and her fine black hair swayed gently as a breeze blew past. Her thin figure seemed as if it would be blown away with the wind. As one looked towards her face, one would discover that it was exceedingly familiar. That exquisite and pretty face belonged to the young lady who had followed Lin Dong and the rest as they charged out from the 100 Empire War, Suro. However, on the pretty face of the girl that was once so weak that even her words were rather timid, was a toughness and determination that she had not possessed back then. The young girl from back then finally had the ability to shoulder great responsibility. Little sister disciple Suro. A figure descended and appeared at Suru's side. She watched the endlessly trembling great formation with worry and said, "If this continues, we will not last for long." Suru's small hands tightly clenched as she gritted her teeth and replied, "No matter what, we must endure until senior sister Qingzhu completes the inheritance process. Else the efforts of Palace Master and the rest will be completely wasted." Yes. That Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciple nodded. Soon after, she looked towards the ancient temple at the center of the island and softly said, "But even if senior sister Qingzhu completes the inheritance process, even Palace Master and the elders were completely defeated by Yuan Gate." Senior sister. Suro gently glanced at the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciple and said, "No matter the outcome, our Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace swears to fight to the last person." Yes. When she saw the determination on Suru's face, that senior sister's eyes reddened as she gritted her teeth and nodded. She swiftly descended to command the numerous Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples. Suro gazed at her back and softly sighed in her heart as tiredness was revealed in her eyes. In a short few days, the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace Master and elders had all been defeated by the enemy and sustained severe injuries. The entire sect was being managed by some extremely popular disciples, and for them, the pressure was rather great. Suro pursed her lips. Soon after, she tightly clenched her tiny fists with all her might, completely suppressing the weakness in her heart. She still remembered that there was once a person back then in the 100 Empire War, a person from a low-rank empire who had overcome all the obstacles in his way, and finally became the most dazzling existence in the 100 Empire War. He had taught her how to bravely advance without the fear of death for the sake of protecting something. Big brother Lin Dong, the current me is no longer afraid of anything. To protect Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, I will not fear any foe. Suro smiled a little, before she slowly lifted her head. Under the glow of the setting sun, her small pretty face appeared exceptionally divine. The trembling of the formation in the sky became increasingly violent, and even cracks had stealthily started to appear. The countless Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples below tightly gripped the weapons in their hands at this moment, while the Yuan power within their bodies started to surge like floodwaters. Bang! Reflected in countless eyes, Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace Final Protection Formation finally completely shattered as black clouds that covered the sky swept forth. Senior sister and brother disciples. Our bodies may die, but the palace gates can never fall. Asterisk goosebumps asterisk. Suro watched the incoming black clouds that blotted the sky. Tears rolled down from her large eyes, but her somewhat hoarse shout resounded across the entire area. Scarlet red rose in the eyes of countless Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples, before they swept forth like a flood. Our bodies may die, but the palace gates can never fall. Attack! Fighting noises filled the sky as the sun set. A scene that was extremely bitter. At a place even further away, several shooting stars had already pushed their speeds to the limit as they frantically hurried towards Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. The sharp edge of the sword was accompanied by wild Yuan power as it whistled past. Fresh blood splashed in all directions as many figures spat out blood and flew backwards. Their bodies twitched and quickly became ice cold. In their eyes was a trace of despair. Countless figures seemed to fill the sky and cover the land as they swept out from within the black clouds. They were like locusts as they charged into the huge island floating in the sky. Ferocious battle cries resounded over the entire place. Miserable cries and fresh blood added a layer of misery to the land. Suro held the longsword in her hand. With a slash, she killed over a dozen Yuan Gate disciples around her. Her green dress was also dyed in blood. That small and pretty face of hers looked at the blood-red floor as intense grief flashed across her eyes. All disciples, protect the main palace! Suro cried out. Majestic Yuan power surged and she once again caused the many Yuan Gate experts around her to spit out blood and fly backwards. However, a pale look emerged on her face in the face of the flood-like attacks. Understood. Countless figures around her cried out in unison. They formed a huge array that surrounded the palace, blocking the Yuan Gate's flood-like attacks that came at them from all directions. However, each time the Yuan Gate disciples charged forward, the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples would leave behind a pile of corpses. After which, they were once again forced to pull back their line of defense. Even though this was the case, not a single person withdrew. Although there was despair in their eyes, they did not show any signs of giving up. Every place had a pillar of faith that belonged to them alone. Just like how the Tao sect disciples believed in Lingqing, the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples had a pillar of faith whom they fully believed in within their hearts. That pillar of faith was called Lingqing Xu. She was the most outstanding person of Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace in the last 1,000 years. This was not something that only the disciples felt. Even the palace master and the many elders deeply believed this. As long as she had yet to fall, Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace would be like the moon in the sky, an eternal existence which would never disappear. The atmosphere within the simple yet imposing palace was peaceful, very different from the desperate battles that were spreading outside. Majestic Yuan power gathered into many rivers that flowed within the entire hall. One could see countless flickering crystals within the Yuan power rivers. Crystals that were as dazzling as diamonds. These Yuan power rivers gathered into an ancient and complex formation. There were dozens of elders seated around the formation. Their complexions were deathly pale. Majestic Yuan power continuously surged out from within their bodies before gathering together and pouring into the ancient formation. Yuan power condensed into a green lotus at the middle of the formation. Atop the green lotus sat a lovely and beautiful figure. She had fine ink black hair. Her skin was snow white, and her eyebrows were bent like a willow leaf. Although there was a thin veil over her face, it was still possible to see its soul-rendering outline. At this moment, her slender hands had formed an extremely mysterious gesture. Her fingertips were touching each other while her palms curved into an extraordinary arc. It was as though the entire world was contained within. An indescribable ripple was stealthily being emitted. A pretty middle-aged woman at the very front was staring intently at the extreme beauty at the middle of the formation. In the next moment, she suddenly bit the tip of her tongue and a mouthful of essence blood fell into the formation. After which, a thunderous cry sounded. Xingzhu, feel the zenith. The dozen surrounding elders likewise spat out a mouthful of essence blood as the auras on their bodies rapidly weakened. Their originally white hair gradually withered and even fell off at this moment. The huge and ancient formation seemed to be stealthily rotating at this moment. In the next instant, the extreme beauty inside suddenly trembled. One could see a radiance suddenly surface above her head. This light appeared extremely blurry and was only 5 feet in size. However, this tiny 5 feet radius contained an extremely ancient ripple, a hazy ripple that seemed to be primal chaos itself. Wild joy was revealed on the defeated faces of the surrounding elders when they saw this scene, as murky tears rolled down their faces. In the end, they struggled to their feet and sincerely knelt towards the extreme beauty in the middle of the formation. Has it really succeeded? The deathly pale pretty middle-aged woman watched this scene as her body shook with excitement. Without any concern for her rapidly whitening hair, she laughed out loud, "Ha ha, it has been 1,000 years. My 9 Heaven Supreme Purity Palace finally has a disciple who has truly sensed the zenith. All of us can die without regrets." The pretty middle-aged woman once again spat out a mouthful of blood as her shrill laughter rang out and her body quickly collapsed. The other elders also slowly fell to the ground as their auras gradually disappeared. The vast and endless Yuan power rivers in the air suddenly came whistling downwards. Finally, it poured into the extreme beauty. Faced with the influx of power that even an ordinary samsara stage expert would not be able to endure, the white-cloaked lady actually managed to directly absorb all of it. The great beauty suddenly opened her tightly shut eyes as the Yuan power river poured into her body. Those eyes of hers were like the deep ocean, clear and boundaryless. However, there was also a unique ripple within them. This ripple seemed to ride above the world. However, the ripple was only present for a moment before disappearing. Soon after, her figure appeared beside the rapidly aging middle-aged beauty. She hurriedly helped the latter up and anxiously cried, "Teacher!" The pretty middle-aged woman slowly opened her eyes after Lingqing Xu cried out. She looked at the red-eyed great beauty with pleased eyes. The blood at the corner of her lips caused her to appear exceptionally miserable. "Xingzhu, you have really succeeded. Who else in this 9 Heaven Supreme Purity Palace would be addressed in such a manner other than Lingqing Xu? Teacher, how are you feeling?" Lingqing Xu tightly hugged the middle-aged beauty. At this moment, her voice had become a little choked despite her usual cool and indifferent character. "Ha ha, I have already passed on my entire life's cultivation to you. I'm afraid that it will be difficult to keep this life of mine." The pretty middle-aged woman slowly extended her hand and wiped away Lingqing Xu's tears and said, "There is no need to be sad. Being able to witness you sensing the zenith before I die is already my greatest achievement. Teacher, you will be okay." Beads of tears fell from Lingqing Xu's eyes as she softly sobbed. "Foolish child. This body of mine was seriously injured to begin with. I am already very satisfied to have been able to do something for you at this final moment." The pretty woman's face was warm and gentle. She glanced at Lingqing Xu before she suddenly said, "The person who took your virginity back then is that Lin Dong from Dao sect, right?" Lingqing Xu was stunned. However, she bit her red lips tightly and refused to speak. "You visited the Great Yang Empire annually for the last 3 years. Do you really think that teacher does not know what you went to do?" The pretty middle-aged woman softly said, "I only did not expect that there would actually come a day where this aloof and proud disciple of mine would do such things for a man. That little brat is really blessed. He helped me back at the unique devil region. I merely wanted to return this favor. Teacher, please do not think more of it. Xingzhu does not have much hopes when it comes to romance. I only wish to ensure 9 Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace prospers forever." Lingqing Xu softly said, "You foolish girl. I knew what happened ever since you returned from the Great Yang Empire back then. Yet, you were incredibly stubborn and refused to mention the name of the person who took your virginity. Isn't this because you are afraid that teacher will tear that person into pieces in anger? But by taking your virginity back then, that fellow also completely ruined the great purity skill that you practiced so hard for so many years. That is something essential to sensing the zenith. The pretty middle-aged woman sighed. Teacher, it is impossible for everything to be perfect in this world. Although the great purity skill that I had practiced was ruined, I also ended up gaining a blessing from this disaster and successfully sensed the zenith. Just who can clearly distinguish between blessing and disaster? Lingqing Xu said. You are still protecting him even till now. You have tried to sense the zenith for many years. That little fellow is greatly responsible for the fact that you were only able to touch it now. The pretty middle-aged woman laughed bitterly. Soon after, she sighed and said, hopefully that little fellow is indeed worthy of you. You have felt the zenith. Although this is only the initial stage, your future accomplishments will be limitless. Xu, do you know what is the greatest secret hidden by our 9-heaven supreme purity palace? The middle-aged woman was quiet for a moment before she suddenly asked. No, Lingqing Xu shook her head. There was a somewhat lost expression in her pretty eyes. Even with her position in 9-heaven supreme purity palace, she was still not completely aware of its secret. From this, one could tell that this so-called secret was extremely well hidden. This matter has been passed on verbally from one palace master to another in 9-heaven supreme purity palace since the first generation. Our 9-heaven supreme purity palace has another name during in the distant past. It was called Zenith Palace. Zenith Palace? Lingqing Xu was slightly startled. She quickly shook her head. Although she had read many ancient texts, she had never read of the existence of this great sect during those ancient times. Truth be told, 9-heaven supreme purity palace does not have the qualifications to call itself the successor to Zenith Palace. Of course, you can perhaps now be considered to have barely touched the path of Zenith Palace. However, you cannot call yourself a member of Zenith Palace. The pretty middle-aged woman said. There has only been one member of this Zenith Palace since that ancient era. One member? Lingqing Xu frowned and asked, who? The person who stood at the peak of this world, the great symbol ancestor. An extremely fanatical respect suddenly rose within the pretty middle-aged woman's eyes. Symbol ancestor? Lingqing Xu's pretty figure shook and her expression finally altered. The peak expert, who had once led the countless lives of this world to fight the evil Yimo, was actually the founder of this Zenith Palace? Zenith Palace was not created by the symbol ancestor. However, this name originated from him. Even we do not know whether the so-called Zenith Palace is a sect or whether it represents an even greater secret. The symbol ancestor can be considered a member of Zenith Palace. Amongst his 8 great disciples, also known as the 8 ancient masters, the Ice Master can perhaps be considered half a member. The remaining 7 masters cannot meet the criteria. However, I believe that even they might not be clearly aware of the meaning of this Zenith Palace. This seemed to be the greatest hidden secret in this world. From a certain point of view, you can also be considered the 9th disciple of the symbol ancestor. Lingqing Xu was startled. This matter was far too mysterious. On top of being baffling, she had actually ended up gaining a connection with the expert who stood at the peak of the world. The pretty middle-aged woman coughed violently while she uttered these words. Blood continued to seep out from her lips and the remaining life in her eyes rapidly disappeared. Do not cry, Xu. You must promise me that you will ensure that our 9-heaven supreme purity palace will continue on for tens of thousands of years. It must not end at my hands. The pretty middle-aged woman tightly grabbed Lingqing Xu's hands at the very last moment as she uttered these last few words. The life within the latter's eyes also completely disappeared. Teacher! Lingqing Xu cried out in grief. She finally could not resist jumping onto the pretty middle-aged woman's arms as she wept without end. The seriously injured elders in the palace revealed an expression of great sadness and quietly sobbed. Xu, now is not the time to grieve. Our 9-heaven supreme purity palace is facing the danger of being destroyed. You need to fight in order to prevent our destruction. An elder said in a deep voice while suppressing the injuries within her body. Lingqing Xu's hand gently wiped off the tears on her face. After which, she knelt down towards the now ice-cold body of the pretty middle-aged lady. She respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Those crystal-like tears fell onto the ground, leaving water stains. Teacher, you can be rest assured that the palace gates will never fall even if Xu dies. Lingqing Xu slowly clenched her slender jade-like hand as tiny veins protruded on the surface of her skin. Soon after, she suddenly stood up. Her hand held a long sword as her body turned into a ray of light. The ray of light tore through the doors of the palace while accompanied by an overflowing aura of sharpness. After which, she charged into the blood rain that permeated the sky. Amidst the bloody fights across the sky, that slender figure appeared like a slowly blooming flower within the flames. It would ultimately turn into ashes, but it was duty-bound to never look back. This video will end here.